In 1974, farmers digging a well in China made the greatest archaeological discovery of the 20th century. But who actually built the Terracotta Army? The answer is a man named Qin Shi Huang, the ruthless first emperor of China, who conquered 6 warring states and built an eternal guard for his afterlife. This is the story of that army, and of the man who forced 700,000 people to build it. And almost everything famous about the Terracotta Army, the rust-proof weapons, the unbreakable swords, the 8,000 unique faces, turns out to be wrong, or at least far stranger than the legend you have been told. The man at the center of it declared himself the first emperor of a unified China. He burned books, buried scholars alive, and swallowed poison every single day because he believed it would let him live forever. His clay soldiers were built to serve him in death, an army of roughly 8,000 life-sized warriors, every one of them armed, every one of them facing east toward the lands he had conquered. To understand who built this army, we first have to understand the kind of man who could command it into existence. And that man was born in the wrong city, on the wrong side of a war. Yingzheng was born in the year 259 BCE in Handan, the capital of a rival kingdom called Zhao. His father was living there as a political hostage. China at that point was not one nation. It was 7 kingdoms locked in centuries of war, a period so violent that historians simply call it the Warring States. By the age of 13, Zheng had inherited the throne of one of those kingdoms, the state of Qin. By 22, he had crushed an internal coup and seized full control. And then he did something no ruler had managed in over 500 years. He conquered all of them. Beginning in the year 230 BCE, his armies fell on the rival kingdoms one after another. Han fell first, then Zhao, the land of his own birth, then Wei, then Chu, then Yan, and finally Qi in the year 221 BCE. In roughly a decade, 6 kingdoms became one empire, and the man who ruled it decided the old royal titles were too small. He invented a new one for himself, Huangdi, first emperor. He intended his descendants to rule as second emperor, third emperor, onward for 10,000 generations. What he built next reshaped a civilization. He standardized the written script so every region wrote the same way. He standardized the currency, the weights, the measures, even the width of cart axles, so that wheels fit the same road ruts across the entire empire. He divided the land into 36 regions run by appointed officials rather than hereditary lords. He confiscated the weapons of the conquered and melted them down into 12 giant bronze statues for his palace. And he began construction of the Epang Palace, a monumental complex meant to house 10,000 courtiers. And he enforced all of it through a philosophy of total control called legalism, administered by his chancellor Li Si. Under this system, the law presumed guilt, and a single crime could condemn an entire family. In the year 213 BCE, on Li Si's advice, the emperor ordered the burning of nearly every history and philosophy text that did not serve the state. Later accounts claim 460 scholars were buried alive in the capital for defying him. When his own eldest son, Crown Prince Fusu, objected to the killings, the emperor exiled him to the northern frontier. This was the man the Terracotta Army was built for. So now we turn to the army itself, and to the 700,000 hands that actually made it. That number comes from a historian named Sima Qian, who wrote his records around the year 94 BCE, roughly a century after the emperor died. He reported that 700,000 conscripted laborers were sent from across the empire to build the mausoleum at Mount Li, overseen by the Chancellor Li Si, and that the work took close to 38 years. We should be honest that this figure is debated. Duan Qingbo, the archaeologist who led excavations at the site for more than a decade at Northwest University in Xi'an, has argued that the main construction may have taken only about 7 years, and that Sima Qian's grander number may carry some literary exaggeration written for a later audience. So we hold that 700,000 loosely. What is not in doubt is the sheer scale of what these laborers left behind. Pit 1 alone measures about 750 feet long and 200 feet wide. That is close to 2 American football fields laid end to end. Excavating it meant removing an estimated 70,000 cubic meters of earth. Across Pit 1, Pit 2, and Pit 3, archaeologists estimate more than 8,000 soldiers, around 130 chariots, and over 600 horses. The figures stand between 5.5 feet and 6.5 feet tall, the officers taller than the infantry. And we know all of this only because, in 1974, a farmer named Yang Jifa, digging a well near the village of Lintong, struck one of their heads by accident, about 10 feet underground. That discovery site, located 30 kilometers east of modern Xi'an, would eventually become a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1987. This brings us to the first myth we need to take apart. You have almost certainly heard that all 8,000 faces of the Terracotta Army are unique, like snowflakes, each one a portrait of a real soldier. It is a beautiful idea. It is also not quite true. An art historian named Lothar Lederos showed that the warriors were built like products on a production line. Feet, legs, torsos, arms, hands, and heads were each made separately from a small set of molds, then assembled and finished by hand. Researchers documenting the figures counted the actual inventory: 2 types of feet, 3 types of shoes, 8 types of torso, 2 types of hands, and only about 8 to 10 basic face molds. The individuality came afterward. Workers added ears, mustaches, hairstyles, and expressions by hand over the molded base. So the warriors are not 8,000 portraits. They are something arguably more impressive. They are the product of an industrial assembly system more than 2,000 years old, one that mass-produced an entire army while still making each soldier look human. As one British museum curator put it, these probably were not portraits in the Western sense at all. Before we go deeper into the science, if this is the kind of history you come here for, consider subscribing, because we dig into the parts most channels skip. Now let us get to the weapons, and the single biggest myth of them all. For about 40 years, one claim defined these warriors in popular science. The story went that the bronze weapons buried with the army had been coated in chromium, a rust-proofing technology that modern industry did not patent until the 20th century, 2,000 years ahead of its time. It appeared in books, in museums, and in documentaries everywhere. In the year 2019, a team led by Marcos Martinon Torres, now a professor of archaeological science at the University of Cambridge, tested the claim directly. They analyzed 464 weapon parts. They found meaningful chromium on only 37 of them, about 8%. And the chromium was not on the blades. It was concentrated on the parts that had once touched lacquered wood and bamboo: the sword handles, the lance fittings, the trigger pieces. The chromium had never been applied to the bronze on purpose. It had leached onto it from the decayed lacquer of the wooden parts that surrounded it. The team's conclusion was blunt. The chromium anti-rust theory should be abandoned. So why are the weapons so well preserved after 22 centuries underground? The real answer is less magical and more elegant. A high tin content in the bronze, skilled quenching of the metal, and the particular chemistry of the Xi'an soil, fine-grained, mildly alkaline, and low in the organic material that would normally eat away at metal. No lost super technology, just good metallurgy and good ground. While we are dismantling legends, there is another one worth naming directly. You may have heard of a bronze sword found pinned flat beneath a fallen warrior for 2,000 years. A sword that supposedly sprang back perfectly straight the instant the weight was lifted off it. It is a great story. It also has no traceable archaeological source. It appears only on tourism sites, which often contradict each other about which pit it came from, and it is frequently confused with a different famous sword found in another province in 1965. What is genuinely true is impressive enough on its own. Qin bronze swords are long, narrow, sharp, and astonishingly intact, for reasons of chemistry, not science fiction. Now we come to the part of this site that no living person has ever seen: the tomb itself. The warriors are only the outer guard. The emperor's actual burial mound sits about a mile away, and it has never been excavated. Not because no one wants to, but because opening it may be impossible to survive. Sima Xi'an described an underground palace with a ceiling of pearl constellations, and across the floor, 100 rivers of Mercury, the rivers of China recreated in flowing liquid metal, kept in motion by some hidden mechanism. For centuries, that sounded like pure myth. Then scientists tested the soil above the mound. They found mercury, and a great deal of it. One borehole spiked to 1,440 parts per billion, while the surrounding readings averaged far above anything the local environment should ever produce. In the year 2020, a team including the laser spectroscopy researcher Sune Svanberg used a technique called differential absorption LiDAR to measure mercury vapor in the air directly above the mound. They detected concentrations several times the normal background level, and estimated that the tomb is still slowly breathing out mercury, on the order of 1 ton lost to the air over time. The buried total is anyone's guess. Estimates range from a few tons to more than 100. And in the year 2025, Chinese investigators identified ancient cinnabar mining sites at Shenyang, a region holding roughly a fifth of China's mercury reserves, as a likely source for where all that liquid metal originally came from. The rivers of mercury were not a poet's invention. They are really down there. And they are a large part of why the tomb stays sealed to this day. The technology to excavate it safely and to preserve what lies inside before it crumbles in open air does not yet exist. That preservation problem is not theoretical. We can watch it happen in real time. Every warrior in the Terracotta Army was originally painted in brilliant color: reds, greens, blues, and a synthetic purple that modern chemists did not even re-identify until the 1980s. The paint sat on a base layer of lacquer. And when that lacquer meets dry air after 2,000 years in wet ground, it curls within about 15 seconds and flakes away in roughly 4 minutes, carrying the color with it. The conservator Katharina Blansdorf, who reconstructed the original coloring of the figures, has said that without intervention, the paint is essentially lost within a week of excavation. The plain gray army the world pictures is not how it looked. It is simply what remains after the air gets to it. Today, ongoing conservation efforts at the Emperor Qin Shi Huang's Mausoleum Site Museum work to preserve both what has been excavated and what remains buried. There is one more group we have not yet talked about. Not the emperor, not the warriors, the people who actually did the building. About 500 yards from the army, archaeologists found a mass grave of laborers. More than 100 skeletons, men mostly between 15 and 40 years old, their bones showing arthritis, healed fractures, and the deep muscle damage of relentless heavy work. Some were buried still wearing iron shackles. Genetic and chemical studies of those bones suggest many of them came from the south of China, possibly from the conquered state of Chu, hundreds of miles from where they died. They were not honored craftsmen remembered by name. They were conscripts and prisoners, worked until they broke, then tipped into a pit beside the monument they had raised. When we ask who built the Terracotta Army, this is the truest answer we have. They did. And the emperor they built it for never received the eternity he paid for with their lives. Ying Zheng spent his final years terrified of death and chasing a cure for it. He sent expeditions to find mythical islands of immortals. He swallowed pills prepared by court alchemists, pills laced with mercury, the very same metal that fills his tomb, in the belief that they would preserve him forever. Instead, they almost certainly poisoned him. In the year 210 before the Common Era, he died on the road during a tour of the Eastern Empire, at the age of 49. What happened next reads like the dark mirror of everything he built. His chancellor Li Si and a scheming eunuch named Zhao Gao concealed the death. Zhao Gao, who had risen to become one of the most powerful men in the empire through his control of palace communications, saw an opportunity to manipulate the succession. They were 2 months and nearly 1,300 miles from the capital, and they feared the news would trigger revolt before they could secure the succession. So they kept the corpse in its covered carriage, brought it meals, changed its clothes, and pretended the emperor still lived. As the body decayed in the summer heat, they loaded a second cart with rotting salted fish and drove it alongside the imperial carriage so that no one would question the smell. The man who unified China, who standardized its language and its roads, who built an army of 8,000 to guard him for eternity, made his final journey home as a secret kept by a cart of rotten fish. And the forged orders his conspirators issued along the way killed his rightful heir, Fusu, and one of his greatest generals. Within 4 years, the dynasty he intended to last 10,000 generations had collapsed completely. Which returns us to where we started, to a well in 1974, and a clay face that had waited in the dark for more than 2,000 years. We tend to look at the Terracotta Army and see the power of the emperor who ordered it. But once we know what the science has revealed, the meaning quietly inverts. Every individualized face was finished by a worker whose own name is lost. Every flake of vanished paint marks the distance between what was built and what survives. And the man at the center of it all, who conquered 6 kingdoms and bent an entire civilization to his will, spent his final breath losing the only war he truly cared about. He wanted to live forever. What outlived him instead was the army, the silence of a sealed tomb, and the memory of the hands that were buried building it.